The storm that night didn't sound like rain. It sounded like the sky itself was breaking apart. Wind howled through the narrow streets of downtown Seattle, sweeping papers, leaves, and the last trace of daylight into the dark. Inside a tall glass tower that touched the clouds, Aaron Blake was the only one still awake. Most people knew him as the founder and CEO of Blake Dynamics, a tech empire that built everything from smart security to self-driving systems. But tonight, his world felt small, just the echo of thunder, the glare of screens, and the empty luxury of success that no longer warmed him. He sat behind his marble desk, staring at a report he couldn't finish reading. His reflection on the glass looked like a stranger, a man with perfect everything but peace. When the lightning flashed, he rubbed his temples and thought about the last time he'd felt something real, before work, before the walls, before loneliness turned into routine. It was almost midnight when a soft, rapid knocking interrupted the rhythm of the storm. At first he thought it was the wind, until it came again, sharper this time. 3 knocks. Hesitant. Human. His security system flashed on the monitor, a tiny figure at the entrance, drenched head to toe. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a yellow raincoat that hung too big on her small frame. She was holding something against her chest. Aaron frowned, confused. No one should be out here at this hour, especially not a child. He hesitated, then went to the elevator and descended to the lobby. When the glass doors slid open, cold air rushed in, biting through his tailored suit. The girl looked up, eyes wide, water dripping from her bangs. "Please," she said, barely above a whisper. "Can I come in? My mom said to wait somewhere safe." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. Aaron hesitated for a second, then nodded and opened the door wider. She stepped in slowly, clutching a small stuffed bunny against her chest. The toy's ear was torn, its fur darkened by rain. He led her to the lobby's sofa and fetched a towel from the restroom nearby. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she said, her lips pale. "And your mom? Where is she?" Lily looked down at the toy and didn't answer. The silence was heavier than the storm outside. Aaron sighed, kneeling beside her. "You're safe here, okay? No one's going to hurt you." She nodded, staring at the floor. Aaron brought her a cup of hot cocoa from the office kitchen, stirring it himself though he hadn't done such a thing in years. When she took the first sip, he realized her hands were shaking too much to hold the cup steady. He sat beside her, letting the hum of thunder fill the space between questions. "Where do you live, Lily?" he asked. She pressed her lips together, then whispered, "We used to live near the river. But it flooded. Mom said we'd find a new place." Her voice cracked on the last word. He understood immediately, this wasn't just a lost child. This was someone who had been left behind by a system that didn't care. The city outside glittered with wealth and comfort, yet here sat a little girl in soaked shoes and a coat 2 sizes too big. Aaron remembered being poor once, long before the fame. His mother used to say, "We rise by lifting others." He had forgotten that lesson somewhere between board meetings and billion-dollar deals. He brought her dry clothes from the gym downstairs, a sweatshirt with his company logo and a pair of jogging pants that nearly swallowed her whole. She smiled faintly when she put them on. "They're soft," she said. He chuckled. "They used to belong to me." She looked at him curiously. "You live here?" He nodded. "Kind of. I work too much, so this feels like home now." She tilted her head. "But it's empty." That one sentence hit him harder than any investor's critique ever had. When he asked again about her mother, Lily hesitated, then said softly, "She said she'd come back when the rain stopped. She told me to wait by the tall glass building with the light on top." Aaron froze. His office tower was one of the few skyscrapers still lit at night. That meant her mother had sent her here deliberately, maybe out of desperation, maybe out of faith that someone inside would help. He checked the security footage again, scanning the street outside. There was no one. Just rain. Just emptiness. He looked back at Lily, who was now curled under a blanket, the bunny tucked under her chin. For the first time in years, Aaron felt something shift inside him, not pity, but a strange sense of purpose. The storm didn't let up through the night. Aaron moved Lily to the guest room in his penthouse suite on the 40th floor. She fell asleep almost instantly, her hand still gripping the bunny. He stood by the window, staring down at the streets that looked like rivers of light and water. He thought of all the nights he'd stayed up here alone, thinking success would fill the silence. But tonight, one frightened little girl had done what billions couldn't. She made the silence human. When morning came, the city was washed clean but heavy with fog. Aaron called the police to report a found child, but something in his chest clenched as he hung up before pressing send. If he handed her over immediately, she'd end up in a shelter, another name on a file, another case lost between forms. He told himself he just needed to wait a few hours. Maybe the mother would show up. Maybe this was temporary. When Lily woke, she asked if the storm had stopped. He nodded and smiled. It's still cloudy, but the sky's trying. She laughed, a tiny sound that made the whole apartment feel brighter. She followed him into the kitchen, curious about everything. Do you make your own breakfast? She asked. Usually not, he admitted. Then you don't know how. She giggled. He gave in and helped her pour pancake mix, both of them clumsy but laughing like old friends. Halfway through breakfast, she looked out the window and said softly, "Mom likes pancakes too." Aaron felt his throat tighten. "We'll find her, Lily," he said. "I promise." He spent the afternoon calling local shelters, hospitals, even the precinct downtown, describing a woman who might have been caught in the storm. No luck. Each unanswered call built a quiet panic in him. He looked at Lily, now sitting on the floor drawing pictures of clouds, and wondered if this was fate or punishment. He had built a life around algorithms and logic, yet this one moment defied both. 2 days passed. No one came. Aaron had his driver scan nearby areas, his assistant contact social services, but still nothing. Every night, Lily would ask, "Do you think she's looking for me?" And every time he'd answer, "Yes, sweetheart. She's trying to find her way back." He didn't know if it was true, but hope was sometimes the only bridge a heart could walk across. He started reading bedtime stories to her, awkward at first, but soon it became their nightly ritual. She loved stories about stars and wishes. Once, after he finished reading, she looked at him seriously and asked, "Do grown-ups get wishes too?" He smiled softly. "Sometimes, but we forget to make them." She tilted her head. "Then I'll make one for you." That night, as she whispered her wish into her bunny's ear, he felt tears burn his eyes for the first time in a decade. On the third morning, Aaron's investigator called. They had found a missing person report from a shelter, a woman named Emily Reeves, 29, last seen near the river with her daughter Lily. Aaron froze. The file said Emily had lost her job 2 months ago, evicted from their apartment after falling behind on rent. The night of the storm, witnesses saw her running toward the bridge. She might have been injured. He hung up and stared out the window. The world outside looked calm again, but inside him, a storm was building. When Lily woke, he couldn't bring himself to tell her yet. Instead, he drove her to the park nearby, where she laughed chasing pigeons and pointed at the skyline. "That one's your building," she said proudly. He nodded, watching her spin with joy so pure it hurt. That evening, Aaron's phone rang again. They had found Emily. She was alive, in a nearby hospital, recovering from hypothermia and exhaustion. She had been searching for her daughter until she collapsed near the waterfront. Relief hit him so hard he had to sit down. For a long time he just stared at Lily playing with her bunny, unaware that the world she'd been praying for was about to return. The next morning, he drove her to the hospital. Lily clutched his hand the entire ride, silent but wide-eyed. When they entered the room, Emily's eyes fluttered open, and the moment she saw her daughter, everything else disappeared. Lily ran forward, the bunny falling to the floor as she cried, "Mommy." Emily wrapped her arms around her, whispering over and over, "I'm so sorry." Aaron turned away, giving them privacy, but tears still blurred his vision. Later, Emily thanked him quietly. "You didn't have to help." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." She told him how she'd lost everything after losing her job, how the storm was the last night she could protect her daughter. She had told Lily to find the tall building because she'd once cleaned its lobby years ago and remembered how bright it looked at night. I just wanted her to find someone kind, she said, her voice trembling. And she did, Aaron replied. When they left the hospital a few days later, Aaron offered them a place to stay until Emily could get back on her feet. He turned his guest room into a small home, complete with Lily's drawings taped to the window. Soon laughter filled the place again. Lily built a fort out of couch cushions and called it Our Castle. Emily began helping him with a charity project, one focused on single mothers and children without homes. Months later, at the foundation's launch event, reporters asked Aaron what had inspired him. He smiled, looking toward the audience where Lily and Emily Saturday, "A knock on my door," he said softly. Sometimes the smallest voices remind us what power is really for. As applause filled the hall, Lily waved from the front row, her bunny perched beside her. The world had changed for all of them that stormy night, but maybe, Aaron thought, it wasn't the storm that did it. It was the courage of a little girl who refused to be invisible. Weeks drifted by, and what began as an act of kindness turned into something that quietly reshaped Aaron's world. The penthouse, once a monument to isolation and cold success, now sounded like life again, with laughter echoing from the kitchen, cartoons humming in the background, and the faint smell of pancakes on weekends. Lily had started drawing on the office whiteboard, filling it with suns, clouds, and stick figures labeled Me, Mommy, and Mr. Aaron. Every time he erased one for a meeting, she'd draw it back, brighter than before. It made him smile in a way he hadn't for years. Emily had also begun to heal, both in body and spirit. She spent her mornings volunteering at a community shelter and her evenings helping Aaron redesign a project he'd once abandoned, a housing initiative that aimed to provide safe shelter for single mothers. "You used to dream about helping people," she told him one night, her voice soft as they reviewed blueprints on the kitchen table. "Then you built walls instead." He looked up, meeting her gaze, realizing how right she was. "Maybe I forgot what it meant to build something that matters," he replied quietly. The bond between them grew naturally, not forced, like two lives learning to breathe in rhythm again. Lily had stopped flinching when thunder rolled in. Now she would run to the window and say, "See, it's just the sky singing." She still kept her bunny close, but she slept easier now, knowing the world could be kind again. One Sunday morning, Aaron took them both to a small park overlooking the bay. The sun was out, the breeze gentle, and Lily was spinning with her arms wide open, hair flying like a golden halo. Emily watched her, smiling, then turned to Aaron. "You know she talks about you all the time," she said. "She says you make the world feel less scary." He chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "She makes it feel worth saving," he answered. That night, as the city lights glittered outside, Aaron sat by the window alone for a while. He looked around the penthouse, at Lily's drawings taped on the walls, at the half-built Lego castle on the floor, at the empty coffee mug Emily had left by the sink, and realized this was no longer just his space. It was theirs. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't feel like the richest man in the room because of his money. He felt it because of what, and who, he had let in. The storm that had once brought a lost little girl to his door had also washed away the walls he'd built around himself. The empire he once guarded now had laughter in its hallways, warmth in its corners, and something he hadn't dared to name in years, love. And as the rain began to fall again outside, softer this time, Aaron Blake finally smiled without reason, knowing that sometimes, the greatest fortune begins with a single knock. By the time spring rolled around, the storm that had once drenched the city felt like a distant memory. The gray skies had given way to warm mornings, and the rooftop garden of Aaron's building had begun to bloom again. Lily had claimed the space as her own little kingdom, filling it with paper windmills, colored pots, and a handmade sign that read, "Lily's Garden, entry fee, one smile." Every evening after work, Aaron found her there, barefoot, watering plants that didn't really need watering, humming softly to her bunny. It became their quiet ritual, him watching, her pretending not to notice that he did. Emily had found a steady job at a local community foundation, helping families rebuild after crises. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had once been the one who needed saving. Now, she was the one helping others start again. Sometimes she'd stay up late writing grant proposals at the kitchen table, while Erin reviewed project plans beside her. They didn't talk much in those hours, but the silence between them had turned gentle, comfortable. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. One Friday evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily found Erin sitting on the balcony, a glass of water in hand, his shirt sleeves rolled up. The city below shimmered in gold and violet hues. "You ever think about that night?" she asked softly, taking the chair next to him. He nodded slowly. "Every day," he said. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened that door." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You would have still been the man who wanted to help," she said. "You just needed someone to remind you how." He turned toward her, studying her face under the soft city glow. "You did that," he murmured. Emily shook her head. "No, Erin. She did." They both looked toward the open door where Lily's small figure slept curled around her stuffed bunny, one hand hanging off the bed like she was reaching for something in her dreams. "She brought us both back," Emily whispered. Erin leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as the night wind brushed across his face. He remembered that first knock, how uncertain, how fragile it sounded, and realized it had been more than just a cry for help. It had been life itself asking to be let in. The next week, his company launched the new initiative he and Emily had been building for months. The Haven Project, a foundation dedicated to helping homeless children and single parents find stability. He stood before hundreds of people that day, cameras flashing, investors watching. But when he spoke, his voice wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was raw. "A little girl once knocked on my door during a storm," he began. "She didn't just need shelter. She reminded me that sometimes, the people we save are the ones who save us right back." The room went silent, the kind of silence that comes when truth hits harder than applause. In the front row, Emily squeezed Lily's shoulder, and Lily smiled up at the stage with pride that only a child could carry. For her, he wasn't a CEO anymore. He was simply the man who listened when the world didn't. That night, as the city lights glimmered over the bay, Erin stood once again at his window. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Emily stood beside him, and Lily was asleep on the couch, her bunny tucked under her chin. The rain began to fall lightly outside, but it wasn't a storm anymore. It was a reminder of how fragile moments can build unbreakable bonds, of how one knock can change everything, and of how even the loneliest heart can find home if it chooses to open the door. The months that followed unfolded like sunlight after a long winter. Erin's once sterile penthouse had turned into something entirely different, a home that breathed. The glass walls that once reflected his loneliness now shimmered with life. Lily's laughter filled every corner, echoing through hallways that had once only known silence. The dining table that used to hold his laptop and late-night reports now carried crayons, spilled juice, and Emily's half-read books. It was messy, it was imperfect, but it was real. Erin found himself waking up earlier, not to check market reports or stock alerts, but to make breakfast with Lily, who insisted on flipping pancakes, even if half of them ended up folded in odd shapes. Emily would walk in with her hair still damp from a shower, teasing both of them about their culinary chaos. Sometimes she'd find Erin staring at the two of them, smiling quietly, the man who once built empires now finding joy in burnt pancakes and giggles. As the Haven Project grew, so did Erin's sense of purpose. He started spending less time at corporate events and more time visiting shelters and schools. He listened to stories of mothers who had lost everything, of children who had learned to be strong before they learned to spell their names. He didn't come as a savior. He came as someone who had finally understood what it meant to care. Emily often joined him, her empathy and experience grounding his ideas in reality. Together, they built something more powerful than business. They built trust. Lily's presence had become the invisible glue holding it all together. She was curious, funny, endlessly creative. She'd make paper crowns for everyone at dinner, declaring herself Queen Lily of the Clouds, and they all played along. One afternoon, she showed Erin a crayon drawing, 3 figures standing under an umbrella in the rain, the smallest one holding a bunny. "That's us," she said proudly. "The storm's still there, but we're dry now." He had to turn away for a moment, pretending to fix his tie just to hide the tears forming in his eyes. One weekend, Emily took Lily to her first day of art class while Aaron stayed behind for a video call with his board. He was halfway through a presentation when he caught his reflection on the dark monitor screen, not the hard-edged CEO they were used to, but a man who looked lighter, calmer, more human. When the meeting ended, he turned off the screen, looked around the apartment, and smiled. Success finally looked like something he could hold, not in numbers, but in moments. That evening, Emily returned with Lily, who came running straight to him, clutching a paper sculpture of a tiny door with the words, "Thank you," written in colorful marker. "It's for you," she said, her eyes shining. "Because when I knocked, you opened." Aaron crouched down to her level, his voice breaking as he replied, "And I'll never close it again." Emily watched them quietly, her heart full. The city outside glittered as if it was listening, the soft hum of life wrapping around them like a promise that even in a world built on ambition and noise, love could still arrive quietly, softly, in the shape of a knock during a storm. By summer, the rhythm of their lives had become something beautiful, steady, imperfect, and full of small miracles. The city that once looked like a blur of deadlines and deals now felt alive to Aaron. Every morning began with laughter echoing through the kitchen, every evening ended with Lily's drawings taped to the refrigerator, and somewhere between those hours, a man who once measured life in profit margins had begun to measure it in smiles. Lily had started school nearby, walking in with her tiny backpack and a heart far bigger than her years. She'd tell her classmates stories about the storm house, as she called Aaron's penthouse, and how it had turned into a home. Sometimes, teachers would ask Emily if the man Lily talked about so fondly was her husband. She'd laugh softly and reply, "No, but he's the reason we both believe in people again." The Haven Project had become a national movement, spreading across states and earning recognition for transforming empty buildings into safe shelters. At every ribbon-cutting ceremony, Aaron would look out at the faces of mothers holding their children and think of that one knock, that quiet, desperate sound that had changed everything. The media often called him the billionaire who cared, but he didn't like the title. "It's not about me," he'd say in interviews. "It's about listening when the world goes quiet." At home, things were simpler. Emily had a habit of leaving sticky notes on the fridge, reminders like, "Buy milk," or small phrases like, "Breathe today." Lily, of course, turned them into her own art, drawing smiley faces or stars next to them. It became their unspoken communication board, tiny words of care tucked between daily chaos. One evening, as the sunset painted the skyline in gold, Lily dragged her easel to the living room. "I'm painting a family," she announced proudly. Aaron glanced over from the couch. "Whose family?" She tilted her head like it was the silliest question in the world. "Ours," she said matter-of-factly. Emily looked up from her book, smiling, her eyes soft but filled with something deeper, gratitude, maybe even love. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Emily and Aaron sat on the balcony. The city stretched endlessly below, lights flickering like scattered stars. She turned to him and said quietly, "You've changed, Aaron." He gave a small laugh. "Or maybe I finally remembered who I used to be." She nodded. "Maybe. But I think Lily brought out the part of you that was still good, the part you thought you'd lost." He looked at her, the woman who had once stood on the other side of struggle, now steady and strong beside him. "And you reminded me that being strong doesn't mean standing alone." There was a pause, the kind that says more than words ever could. The air between them was heavy with unspoken truth. Emily looked down, smiling. "You know, she thinks of you as family." He glanced toward Lily's closed door. "She's not the only one," he whispered. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of jasmine from the rooftop garden. Below, the city pulsed with noise and life, but up here, everything was still. Two hearts finding balance in the quiet, two lives learning how to build something that no storm could ever wash away again. The first anniversary of the Haven Project arrived on another rainy evening, poetic, almost as if the sky remembered how their story began. The city lights shimmered through the drizzle, turning every drop on the glass into a tiny spark. The event was grand, a hall filled with press, philanthropists, families, and volunteers. But to Aaron, the only faces that mattered sat in the front row. Emily, smiling with quiet pride, and Lily, now 8, wearing a simple yellow dress that matched her first raincoat. The little girl who once shivered at his door now beamed with confidence, her bunny, now patched and clean, resting proudly in her lap. When it was time for him to speak, Aaron stood at the podium, the hum of whispers fading into silence. He looked out over the crowd, but his words weren't for them, they were for her. "A year ago," he began, "someone very small reminded me of something very big. That no matter how powerful we think we are never too strong to care and never too weak to be kind." He paused, glancing toward Lily. "On a stormy night, a little girl knocked on my door. I thought I was the one saving her. But the truth is, she saved me." The audience stayed silent for a beat before breaking into thunderous applause. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and somewhere in the noise, Lily's eyes glistened as she whispered to Emily, "That's my friend." Emily wrapped an arm around her and whispered back, "He's everyone's friend now." After the ceremony, Aaron stepped outside for air. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the same kind that used to echo against his windows when he was alone. But tonight, he wasn't. Lily came running out, her hair damp and wild, clutching 2 cups of hot cocoa from the refreshment table. "You didn't get one," she said, handing him a cup with both hands. He took it, smiling, his heart full. "You remembered." She nodded proudly. "Mom says we take care of people who take care of us." They stood under the awning, watching the rain together. Emily joined them a moment later, holding a small umbrella that didn't really fit all 3 of them, but no one cared. Lily laughed as Aaron ducked to stay dry, and Emily leaned in, her shoulder brushing his, just enough to feel the warmth there. "Funny," she said softly. "A year ago, this storm brought us together. Now it feels like home." Aaron nodded, watching the city glow through the rain. "It's strange," he said. "Everything I ever built, all the towers, the deals, the fame, none of it mattered until that knock." Emily smiled. "That's because this wasn't something you built. It's something you opened." As they stood there, the rain began to slow, the clouds breaking just enough for a few stars to peek through. Lily pointed upward, her voice filled with awe. "Look, the sky's healing." Emily and Aaron exchanged a glance that said everything. They were healing too. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lily fell asleep on the couch with her bunny in her arms. Aaron sat across from Emily, the soft glow of the city lighting their faces. "Do you ever think," he asked quietly, "how different everything would have been if she hadn't knocked?" Emily's eyes softened. "Maybe the storm would have found another door," she said. "But I think it chose yours because you needed it the most." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers for just a second, gentle, uncertain, but real. "You and her," he said. "You gave my life back to me." Emily looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You gave it meaning." The clock ticked softly, rain whispering against the glass one last time before the clouds cleared completely. The city below was quiet, almost reverent, as if pausing to honor what had been rebuilt, not an empire, but a family. And somewhere deep in the night, while the world slept, Aaron finally let himself rest too, knowing that the door he once opened in fear had become the doorway to everything he never knew he needed. Love, redemption, and the unshakable truth that sometimes, a single knock is all it takes to change forever. Morning came quietly, the kind of golden morning that seemed to erase every shadow left by the storm. The skyline gleamed, and sunlight poured through the penthouse windows, warming the floors where Lily's drawings were scattered like tiny testaments of joy. The smell of coffee mixed with the sweetness of pancakes, and soft laughter drifted from the kitchen. For the first time in years, Aaron didn't wake to the sound of alarms or emails. He woke to life. Lily sat at the counter, swinging her legs, telling Emily a story about a dream she'd had where clouds turned into castles. Aaron stood by the stove, pretending not to burn the pancakes, though both of them knew he always did. When he finally set the plate down, Lily grinned. "These are crunchy," she announced proudly, as if that were the goal all along. Emily laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth, and Aaron shook his head, smiling. It was a scene he'd once thought impossible. Simple, ordinary, and perfect. After breakfast, they drove to one of the Haven Project's newest shelters, a renovated school building now filled with families rebuilding their lives. As Aaron walked through the halls, children ran past carrying toys, mothers chatted in corners, and volunteers moved with purpose. It was chaotic, but beautiful. Emily stayed close, answering questions, while Lily handed out cookies she'd baked the night before with more enthusiasm than skill. A woman approached Aaron, tired eyes, but smiling. "I just wanted to thank you," she said softly. "My son and we were out there in the rain a few months ago. And now we have a bed, and hope." Aaron nodded, his throat tight. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Thank the people who never gave up." She looked at him knowingly. "You didn't either." That evening, they returned home as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city in streaks of orange and rose. Lily curled up on the couch, her bunny still faithfully by her side, while Emily and Aaron sat nearby, sharing a quiet moment of reflection. "Do you ever miss it?" Emily asked suddenly. "The old life, the one before all this?" Aaron thought for a long time before answering. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember how empty it felt. I had everything, except something to come home to." Emily nodded, her eyes gentle. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I have everything that matters." Lily stirred, half asleep, and mumbled, "You two talk too much." They both laughed softly, the sound carrying through the open windows, blending with the hum of the city below. The night sky stretched wide, and for the first time, it didn't feel endless, it felt close, like it belonged to them. Later, when the lights were dim and silence settled, Aaron stepped onto the balcony. The air was cool and fresh, the city glowing beneath him. He looked at the horizon, the same skyline that had once made him feel small now felt like a promise. He thought of the knock that started it all, the trembling voice that had said, "Please don't tell my mom," and how those words had broken something inside him only to rebuild it stronger. Behind him, Emily appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the light. "You okay?" she asked softly. Aaron turned, his smile easy and full. "More than okay," he said. She joined him, leaning against the railing as Lily's soft breathing drifted from inside. They stood there together, no words needed, just the quiet comfort of knowing that fate had chosen the right storm. And as a gentle wind swept across the balcony, Aaron realized that the greatest moments in life never announce themselves. They arrive quietly, like rain tapping at your window, or a little girl knocking on your door, and if you're lucky enough to listen, they don't just change your night. They change your forever.